There's a reason most musicians never make real breakthroughs, and it's not talent. I've helped thousands break through blocks in their music, and I'm going to share the exact 6-step method that my students have used to make the kind of leap that most players think is impossible. Most advice out there on music practice and just how to get better at music generally is based on continual gradual improvement at the margins. And that's all great, but it's often a lot faster and more fun when you deliberately choose to make a big leap. With the right approach, you'll find that you can make progress in just a couple of months that would have taken you years if you'd gone about doing things the normal way. Picture the landscape of musical skills as a whole field of stepping stones. Normal practice allows you to step to any nearby stone, so you can make great progress gradually. But the landscape isn't always as even as that. Often there are big gaps. Either you can't jump across at all, or you have to go the long way round to find a path that is all small steps just to get back to somewhere that's actually quite close from where you started. Often that long way round is crazy long, or hard to find, or simply doesn't exist. You've got to make one of those giant leaps. What's really interesting and exciting is that the benefits you get don't stop with that initial big leap. Yes, it's great that you've made it and you've made significant progress, but what happens as a result of that is you will feel more motivated, you will feel more self-belief, and that is going to ripple out to all other areas of your music, of your playing, and accelerate your progress in things that you weren't even focusing on. But sadly, most musicians simply never succeed with this. Either they never tried to take a big leap in the first place because it seems impossible, or they try and fail because it's frankly so easy to do it in the wrong way. Now, I've used this method successfully myself many times, and it has been responsible for my most successful growth periods as a musician. So I've been able to extract a repeatable process that I've used with many of my students, and they've got amazing results from it too. So I'm going to share the exact 6 steps that I teach my students so that you can do this for yourself as well. And I'm going to share what is sort of kind of like a 7th secret extra step that allows you to actually unlock ongoing exponential progress rather than merely just make one single big leap. Step 1 is to identify the goal. And what you want to do here is to choose something that is really challenging for you and that really matters to you individually. This really does want to be something that makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, maybe even a lot uncomfortable, because making big leaps is about getting out of your comfort zone and going for something more than you normally would. But at the same time, it's got to be something that you really want for yourself, not something you feel you should do or that other people are telling you you ought to do. Something where you're clear on where a long-term vision you want to get to is, and that this leap is moving you absolutely in that direction. And make sure you think really big at this stage. Don't worry about how you'll do it, or even if you think you'll actually be able to do it. That is going to come later in the next step. Be ambitiously and aggressively optimistic here. You want to be thinking along the lines of, in the best possible world, am I perhaps capable of doing this? Rather than, is this something I'm definitely able to do? Let me give you a specific example here so you can see the sort of thing that I mean. So back almost 20 years ago now, a friend of mine asked me if I could play a solo guitar gig at his wedding reception. And this was something I'd never done before. I'd never even thought of playing a solo guitar gig. I had no repertoire prepared. I wasn't working towards it. I wasn't even really thinking about playing much solo guitar at the time. I was playing in bands. But at the same time, this was something that excited me. I would have loved to be able to play a solo guitar gig. So I said yes. No further thought. I didn't try and work out first, can I do this? What repertoire would I play? What would it involve? Rather, I just said, this is good, this is a good opportunity, I'm going to say yes now and work out how I'm going to make it happen later. Now, that's an example where someone came along and basically just offered me the chance and the choice of a big leap on a stick. So I could either say yes or no. But most of the time, you are going to have to decide for yourself, am I going to make a big leap? What is it going to be? But it can be really hard to choose the right big leaps to make. They want to be very personal to you rather than the sort of thing that everyone says you should do. And at the same time, the right ones are going to feel uncomfortable and scary. So it's going to be tempting to avoid them or to choose something else. So I've created a free tool that you can use to help you choose the perfect leap for you. And you can find a link below to get the tool. Step 2 is to get practical. And this is where we're taking that big goal you've come up with and breaking it down into manageable steps and setting realistic expectations rather than going for too much. So breaking it down into manageable steps is about taking some huge, overwhelming task that just feels too much and splitting it out into small things that you can do one after another. And so it allows you to build up momentum by really getting started on something rather than feeling overwhelmed by no idea where to start. And it gives you that confidence that you can manage it. At the same time that we're doing this, we're also adjusting expectations and making realistic plans. So what that means is we've started off with this really big, scary vision. This is what I want to go for. This is a huge leap. And almost certainly you're then thinking, if you've set it big enough, scary enough, you're thinking, okay, now I need to scale that back, not to something that isn't a leap like that, but to something that is the smallest version of all the things I could go for. So if I'm making a big jump anyway, let's make it the smallest genuine big jump rather than going for something that is way off into the distance and I haven't got a hope of getting there. Now, it could be that you do this by choosing the smallest possible version of your dream or by choosing the easiest possible version of your dream. And I'll give you a practical example of that in a second. But think of it like people talk about a minimum viable product when they're launching a new business or a new product or anything like that. So the aim is not to jump straight to the ideal, polished, finished version, because that's way too hard. The hardest thing in the world is going from nothing to something. And then when you've got that something there, it's much easier to add little bits on to make it slightly better. What your job is at the start is to find what is the smallest version that counts as a leap that I can go for, and I've got a chance of getting there. And once I've got there, I can go to town, I can do lots of stuff later. Remember, there's plenty of time for that later. But right now, you've got to give yourself the best chance and the quickest chance of just getting to that starting point where you've got that momentum. So going back to that solo guitar gig that I was playing at my friend's wedding, how did I make this realistic and manageable? Well, I did not go straight for all the amazing, really difficult solo guitar pieces I wanted to play. I didn't try and do hundreds of them. I picked a few. I picked a lot of really simple ones that were not the ideal ones that I wanted to play, but I thought I would manage to get it done. And where some of them were trickier or longer, I cut down the length, I cut out bits that were tricky, or I adjusted them to make them easier to play. And that was disappointing in a way. That was not exactly how I would like to do it, but it gave me a much better chance of actually getting it done and succeeding rather than aiming for this impossible bigger thing. And again, that's kind of why I hadn't done this before. In my head, I wanted to go for the really big version, and that was just too much. All those things I wanted, I just knew it was too much. But when I'd already said, yes, I'm taking this challenge on, and that I knew I had to make it happen, that forced me to make very specific choices that were incredibly helpful in the long run by being really ruthless about saying, literally, what is the minimum that I can do here? This is not going to be my favorite solo guitar gig ever. I'm going to be quite disappointed with how simple it is or how I've not chosen my favorite songs, but it is going to be something that I can do. And then later, I was able to build on this so much. And this first challenge, getting to that point of actually having some repertoire I could play, made such a difference. Step 3 is setting up some sort of commitment and accountability. So this is about having a particular timeline that you're aiming towards so that there is a schedule when you have to get this thing done by. And the accountability is about making sure some people know that this is happening. So you have expectations there that you now have to meet. So these things are very powerful. Setting deadlines is really good for motivation because you now know you need to get it done. There's fear if you don't get it done. And it's excellent for forcing you to drop all the unnecessary stuff, to stop all the getting distracted and just really focus on what's needed. And then there's the accountability. That makes you much more likely to stick with it, to go through with it, and to actually pull off this big leap that is going to really help you. And going back to my solo guitar gig for the wedding again, that was just built in. By the time I said yes to my friend, that was the accountability. And the wedding itself was a very specific date. I had to get things done by then. And it was really noticeable. As soon as I'd done that, I was working a full-time job at the time. And all of a sudden, coming home from work in the evenings before, I kept thinking, I should do some music practice, some guitar practice, but often it didn't happen. Once I had that deadline in there, that accountability, every afternoon after work, I was straight down to doing a good solid chunk of guitar practice. It felt really easy and I just knew it was going to happen, and it happened every time. It was great. And step 4 is just to do it. just do the work that you've set out here. You've got your big goal, you've broken it down into individual manageable steps, you've committed to a specific date you're aiming for, you've got some accountability. Now you've got to do the work, and that hopefully is pretty straightforward. There are a couple of things though. The first is to acknowledge that there will be fears along the way. You are going to have to deal with these. It's not always going to be comfortable because you might worry whether you're going to get there or not. And also the other thing to say is you've got to be able to accept non-linear progress. It is not guaranteed that once you start, everything will just be in a straight line, gradually up at the same pace all the time. You'll find bits where you go faster, bits where you go slower, and just be aware of that before the start. And as you do it, you will naturally get to the date for your performance or whatever it is when this big leap is happening. And that is great. The thing to go for here is to realize that it is not necessarily about being successful at the end. That is lovely if you can do that, but really we're looking for long-term musical growth rather than one-off, did I get exactly what I wanted at this gig or whatever it was. And that brings us on to step 5, which is to reflect, because you can't know in advance how it's going to go, but there is huge amounts of learning to come after the thing, regardless of whether you've succeeded immediately or you haven't quite met what you wanted. By looking at what has happened, where you've got to, what you learned along the way, you will have made big strides anyway just by doing it. But when you take the time to think about, well, what has happened? What else can I learn for the future? You will get way more learning as well. And so that's going to get you even more results from all the work that you have already done. And there are 2 reasons why you do not need to have the perfect outcome in order for this to be a massive success. And the first one is that by putting in the work to do this thing, you have achieved a level, you've achieved some things that you didn't have before. And so even if the actual result at the end that you were aiming for wasn't perfect, you have got this new stepping stone way ahead of where you were to either try again, refine it, or to move forward from there. So in the case of my solo guitar gig, I knew that whether I played well on the day or badly, I had a little repertoire of tunes that I could play. And so anytime anyone asked me, can you play a solo guitar gig? I was able to say yes. And on top of that, I could always choose to add extra pieces that were harder that I hadn't done before, or improve the ones that were already there. And the second reason why you don't actually have to have an amazing result on the day for this to be hugely helpful is there is so much to learn from what you got into during the process and what happened on the day. So what did you learn about yourself as you were doing the work for this? Were there things that went particularly well or went particularly badly or that you need to change? What did you learn in the event itself, assuming it's a performance or something like that? Maybe something you thought that was going to be a real problem for you was totally fine, and something you had no idea about was a massive issue and derailed everything. But you would never have known that if you hadn't taken the leap and got up there. So now you're aware of a new problem and you can work to fix it in that example. And that is why step 6 is to celebrate your achievement. Because regardless of what has happened, you want to acknowledge the work that you've done, the courage that it's taken to take this leap, and you want to recognize that you have now got new skills and new opportunities. So first of all, just the act of celebrating is something that makes you more likely to do this sort of thing again. It's a little reward mechanism, and that's going to help you keep going with this thing. And on top of that, it's a great point to just look back and see, how far have I come? Where was I there? Where am I now? And what new opportunities does this open up? Because, for example, for me, with the solo guitar gig at this friend's wedding, all of a sudden, if someone asked me to play a solo guitar gig, I could do that. And not just that, I could do it at the drop of a hat. This was a completely new thing for me. And it did happen a few years later. I got asked by some work contacts, could I just play at their summer party? And this was literally half an hour before I was about to head over there as a guest myself. And I would have had not even the chance before. And this time I was able to say, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Took me a while to collect my guitar, think of what I was going to play, turn up there. So I was a bit late, but I was able to literally turn up on the day, play a little set, background music, not too challenging, but unbelievable. Something I would never have even been able to think about before. And all of a sudden, from this one big leap, that sort of stuff becomes possible. So open your horizons like that. And in that last bit, I've kind of hinted a little bit at the secret step 7 I mentioned earlier, because that is to repeat the entire process. So we've got these 6 steps. I'm identifying a goal. I'm making it practical. I'm putting forward some commitment and accountability. I'm doing the work, I'm reflecting on it, I'm celebrating, and all that bit, particularly the reflection and the celebration, sets me up to just go back to the beginning again and identify another goal. So when you do this, you can really get incredible progress because you're now putting one leap after another, or you're leaping in different areas of your music and expanding your ability in completely new ways. So that is all the practical steps that you need to go away and apply this method and make massive leaps forward in your own music. So I hope you'll give that a go. But there are still some big psychological barriers that often cause people to give this a miss and not try it, or to quit halfway. And so I've got a whole more detailed workshop that shows you exactly how to take these big leaps forward. It gives you much more detail about the practical side of things, but it also gives you the tools to get through all the challenging psychological side, the things that might put you off, the things that are going to worry you. And you'll also get to see me coaching some of my own students through their own individual situations, helping them choose what leap would be appropriate for them, how they're going to break it down, all those sorts of things. So loads of practical advice for you to apply to your own situation. Now, if you'd like that training for all the details and the psychological side and the practical examples, then there's a link below where you can grab it. And at the time of filming this, I'm actually offering a discount on the price of the workshop, just to say thank you for taking the time to watch the end of this video. Now, if you're watching this a long time into the future, I can't promise 100% that the discount is still there, but I'm hoping I'll be able to keep it. So I think it's worth checking it out.